So yeah, please forgive me. I am a bit nervous because I don't usually do this. I'm a person who usually has a script and has a few months to sit with her script and be another person. And I get really uncomfortable trying to be myself. So it's lovely to speak to a psychiatrist. I don't want it to be a personal therapy session.
Yeah.
Most of the times, your faith isn't strong enough. You should pray more. Not doing this enough. You're not that enough.
They're barely holding on to the basic aspects of life. How do we expect them to do more? I will not say or do the same thing I heard my parents do. And then you end up having your child and the same tone comes out of your mouth.
I'm doing the whole, when I die, you'll understand the pain.
Because we Asian.
But do you know why we do this? Because
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Aleya and welcome to Faithfuel podcast. A Faithfuel podcast. So, Faithfuel podcast is not just a podcast. This is what I love. It's where deep Islamic wisdom meets the chaos of real life. And speaking of chaos, what other way to share the chaos of my personal life than to also have my sister, Amani.
Assalamualaikum. I'm Amani. I go by Amani. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you for being next to me. I'm a bit nervous. Because I don't usually do podcasts.
So today we have a very special guest who can probably help us work through our sibling issues and many issues, mother issues, wife issues, female issues, everything lah. Basically, we are a whole bag of mixed nuts at home. So, but that's for another day lah, because we understand that our special guest also just arrived today. So let's not scare her off out of the country just yet. She's just gonna run. But yes, we're thrilled to have Dr. Rania Awaad with us. Welcome. It's been awesome just speaking to you for even in a short span of time. You're so warm and welcoming. So alhamdulillah.
thank you so much for that introduction. So good to meet both of you. Thank you for having me on the podcast today.
Okay.
Thank you for being here. Okay, we're gonna jump in straight into the I wouldn't say big stuff, I suppose, because it's heavy, I would say. You probably won't consider it heavy, of course. For us, yes. It's mental health. I don't know if you've noticed, but our community treat mental health like an awkward relative at a family wedding. That's one way of putting it. We know it's there. We know it's there, but no one really wants to talk about it or to it. No one really wants to address it. So why do you think there's still so much stigma around mental health, especially in our Muslim community? And why do you think it's important for us to start addressing it, one, and also highlight how to address it?
Well, first, and I love your analogy about the awkward relative.
Right.
And I get that very much. But I do want to just reframe it a little bit and say, actually, all people, not just Muslims, not just here in Malaysia, really all people have some issues related to mental health, because there's a certain level of admitting potentially that there's something either happening with them or with their family member, or maybe it's happening through the genetics, through the family line. And so there's a lot of people who are like, nope, don't want to deal with this, don't want to talk about it. I'd rather just put my head in the sand and make believe like it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So that's pretty universal.
Right.
And the stigma that's there is also fairly universal, but I'm glad to know that it's starting to come down. Mm-hmm. Definitely, there's a number of generations, the new generations coming through who are much more conversant and able to admit and talk about mental health. Yeah. So I have hope that this is going to change in time.
Inshallah. Just to add a little bit, that when you say the younger generation, our younger sisters are a whole 7 years younger than Amani. So it's the two of us, and then 7 years later, these two. And when I first started struggling with some mental health issues, I was very much stigmatized. I was very much, that's nothing wrong with me. I'm the eldest of 4 girls. I'm stronger than this. I can handle anything. And I was breaking down slowly. And it was the younger generation that just like, okay, you know what? You need help. So here's the number, go see her, and then we're going to fix it. Okay, we can't fix it for you. You can. This person can. So yeah, I would do you think that the younger generation, if you put it in that context, do you think the generation has a bit more, I don't know, how do you call it, wokeism? I don't know whether it's a thing where you're from, but do they have a bit more of that? Like they understand themselves and the general psyche better?
Where people are woke?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Inshallah. So yes, and I also have to say that it's not just the younger generation. A lot of people are coming to the understanding of mental health, but I'm so thankful that the younger generation is really showing us and kind of proving that this is something that needs to happen. But honestly, I'm seeing people with platforms, whether they be actors and actresses, musicians, athletes, people that have a platform, actually be able to come up and say, you know what, I'm either taking a break because I need to at this moment, or I'm going to just actually admit, like on the mic, right, and say, I'm in therapy or I needed some help and assistance. And it just breaks down so much of that stigma and barriers around mental health. If your hero is essentially also saying, I'm human too, I'm vulnerable too, and I need some help sometimes.
So
I think what we find sometimes in our culture, maybe it's that shame of admitting to something, and then it's most of the times, your faith isn't strong enough, right?
Yes.
You should pray more. You should look into yourself. You're not doing this enough. You're not that enough. It's always not being enough.
where's your trust in Allah and His plans?
And it just makes it worse sometimes. It just makes it, it's like, oh, I'm such an awful person because my faith isn't strong enough, and it just spirals. So how?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this idea of, trying to equate mental health with one's faith is actually very common, unfortunately. And it leads to more, it perpetuates the stigma, actually. And in fact, it goes against the very teachings of Islam itself and against the story or the seed of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because, for me, it was a pretty long roundabout journey to get to this field of mental health. It wasn't my chosen field to begin with. It wasn't something I planned to do necessarily. But it was actually in eventually studying the seerah, right, the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that it became so clear that this is the most perfect of all human beings. This is the person who Allah created this universe for, right? And literally the best of all teachers. And yet he had an entire year of his life that was called Am al-Huzn, or the year of sadness, the year of grief. And when you realize that and you say, how could you have a human being who's essentially perfected as far as a human being can go and have such sadness and withdraw from society to where his companions, right, literally were worried about him. And so what about us? Right. Of course, as regular human beings, of course, we're going to have dips like this in our mood, and there'll be, stages and seasons of life. Right. And in some of those seasons, there might be depression or sadness, and it does not have to be against your faith or that you have low faith. Because who's going to say that about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Right. That he had a year of sadness, yet he's somebody who didn't have enough iman? No, definitely not. Yeah. So clearly, you can hold both things together at the same time. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So whenever someone says that, I say, let's go back and review the seerah that we've all studied and we all know. Yeah. Let's just kind of get the light bulb to flash a little bit, because once that happens, I think people can finally understand, oh, this is not I'm bad, or I'm not a good mu'min or believer, right, or something's wrong with my Islam. Right. Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
There have been moments where it has nothing to do with grief. It has nothing to do with loss, but it's just, that,
an internal feeling.
Yeah, it's an internal feeling of like emptiness, and we're still doing whatever it is that we need to do. We're still speaking to Allah. We're still begging and asking and everything, but it's still that
emptiness.
That emptiness. How can we make them understand that it is not because you're not doing enough,
right? Yeah. And this is the question about enough is very important here, because I find people will say to people who are, let's say, going through a mental health challenge, and they'll say, pray more.
Right.
make more dua,
Yes.
have stronger iman. They'll say
Dhikr,
like things
dhikr.
about, or more dhikr, right?
Yeah.
Things that are more. But it's so interesting because when you look at somebody that's struggling with a mental health condition, they're barely holding on to the basic aspects of life, as in to say, just getting up out of bed every day, just brushing their teeth or brushing their hair, taking care of their family, trying to get to work. I mean, it's just basic, sometimes just scraping by, and sometimes they can't even get out of bed.
Yeah.
And in terms of the prayers, they may be just barely doing the 5 or trying their best to reach all 5 prayers. And here we are telling them, do more, when they can't even do enough of the basics.
It's debilitating.
How do we expect them to do more?
Right.
And to me, that's no different. And here I speak as a physician. That's no different to me than when you see somebody with a physical injury, right? They've broken their leg.
Right.
They have crutches. They have a cast on their leg, right? And you would not look at that person and say, go run more.
Yeah.
Like we would never say such a
You
thing.
need to forget the pain, you know, learn to live with it.
We understand that that's not okay, but that we can see it physically.
That's
Right.
true.
With mental health, sometimes they're invisible wounds. You can't really see it. And yet we put all this extra burden on people.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't dare do so if it was a physical condition.
Right. Let's talk about self-care turning into self-importance.
Also, the other side of it.
Yeah. So where do we draw the line between self-care and self-importance?
So self-care, so here let's try to define some of these terms. Maybe this will help.
Right.
When I think of self-care, I'm thinking of somebody who's filling their cup.
Right.
They need to actually be able to have a cup that's full because you cannot pour out from an empty cup.
There you
You
go.
can only pour out what the cup contains. So if you have nothing in it, it's completely dry. You have nothing to give anyone else, let alone yourself. So the self-care is taking care of oneself so that you can then take care of others. And then in terms of the selfish, right? I think this
Yeah.
is part of the issue as well. Something that I heard that was really, I actually read this, it was really beautiful. It was the idea of a person who's practicing self-care is taking just enough. A person who's selfish is taking more than
Too
what they
much.
need,
Right.
right? So there's nothing selfish about self-care.
Okay.
Self-care means you're taking all the aspects, even if it is sitting by the river,
Right.
or if it is kind of taking a vacation, a holiday every so often,
Right.
because you do need a break in the action, and you do need to just be able to, even on a
Breathe.
daily basis, to breathe. Yes, even on a daily basis, to just be able to sit. And personally, I find that for me, I use my prayer times to do this because Allah Subhanahu wa Taala literally has us break in the action every day, 5 times a day, and go to. And literally you're meditating as in to say it's quiet. It's just you and Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Nothing can break that prayer.
Right.
You can't talk to anyone. No one can talk to you.
Yeah.
And you literally have to go away from a very busy place, right? Find the Qibla and pray.
Yeah.
And it's like Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala teaching us, this is part of the pause button that needs to happen daily, every single day. And the more you can do so, if you can add a little more time to it, the better, right? Some extra dhikr, some extra dua time. Excellent. And you find yourself a little more refreshed as opposed to somebody who's just trying to, check the box. I caught my prayer, run to the next thing. Then you catch your 3 minutes, run to the next thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's how life is. And that's okay.
Yeah. If you're forced to,
Right?
yeah.
But every so often, it would be good to just have a few of those prayers literally as a pause
Right.
and a relaxation. I had a teacher when I was studying in Syria. She, I love this example. I use it often. She would say, life is like a merry-go-round. You get on the merry-go-round, just go round and round and round. And round.
Right.
And then the prayer time comes, and it's like somebody presses the pause button on the merry-go-round, and it suddenly stops, and everything that was going round and round chaotic shifts back into focus. And for a few minutes, you can see the clarity again. And then you get right back onto the merry-go-round of life and you just keep going round and round, right? Until each of those prayers does that for you. And so I think it's built into our very deen, you know what I mean? And something we should definitely really invest in as much as we can.
I had a mentor as well. Her name was Yasmin Ahmad. She's a filmmaker. And every time we would be filming on set, we would break 5 times a day. No matter what we were doing, we would break for prayers.
She was amazing. She could find any
Yeah.
place, a little corner at most, but she will do
Yeah.
the 5 times.
I love
and,
that.
and during meetings as well, because she
Yes.
was in advertising as well, and during a meeting, the whole boardroom of people,
She'd be like, wait.
yeah, she's like, hang on, I'll be back in about 3 minutes. But I love how she made it so easy, how she explained, because I worked with her when I was very, very young, and she explained why prayers were so important to her. It was every 5 times a day. She, throughout the day, there would be moments where you would think that you were so great. Well, that was a great decision. Oh, that was a
job.
good
Well
job,
done,
Yasmin.
you.
Well done,
Yeah.
right? You made a good decision, or you made a good,
A good call.
a good call, and or somewhere around the day you go, oh, why did I do that? Oh, what's wrong with me? Why did I do that? So at least 5 times a day, she would put her head down to the love of her life, the biggest love, and she would realize, and then she would understand that there's nothing greater than him, and he is great, right? He is the greatest, and there was so it was not her that is great. It was not her making the great decision, and whatever that happened, good or bad, was supposed to happen. And that was her break, and she implemented that during our filming, and it was something that she made so easy. And I love people who make things easy.
Yes, it seems so natural, so organic.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I love that
Yes.
you had that as a mentor.
Yes.
I have, my similar story is my father was
Yes.
like that. And it's, and he was a very busy person, did a lot of great things, but it's like he would never miss the prayer. But the beautiful thing is he also call us as well to the prayer.
Oh.
So as a little girl, and like, you look up to your dad as like this great
Yeah.
hero. And so, but he was very insistent that to bring me along. And I just loved it because it was like a, daddy daughter
Yes.
time,
Yeah.
and it was just so natural. But then I saw him in whether he was out at work, grocery shopping, we were taking a picnic or a trip. It doesn't matter where we were.
Right.
We were going to stop and pray. And so it just became kind of a natural, organic part of life.
Yeah.
It wasn't even like I had to make a very conscious decision. It was already built in from
Right.
childhood. Do you know what I mean? Of course, eventually you have to make a decision. I'm going to do this for myself.
Yes.
But the role modeling was already there. You could see it. You could see the prayer even on this. And in America, we don't have a Muslim. You have beautiful masajid here in Malaysia.
Alhamdulillah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Right? We don't have such luxuries. So literally we're praying on the side of the road sometimes.
Yeah. And buildings.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
Anywhere you can find to pray.
Yeah.
Because
Oh,
all of Allah's earth is a masjid.
Is it? Do you think that line of self-care and self-importance it gets blurred? Sometimes it's like with mental health issues, we tend to gravitate towards each other. So like I have issues. I know people who are struggling as well. So we want to be there for that person. But then we get to a certain limit where we can't take it anymore. But to say no to that person, or to ignore that person, or to establish boundaries, it feels like abandoning that person. Or sometimes that person would say, "You're abandoning me."
Sure.
Right?
Sure,
So
you make it.
So how do we?
That's that to you. Yeah.
Where is it self-care and then it's no it's
So we'll use
self-care.
we'll use that definition of self-care is what you need.
Right.
So let's use some of the very basic things. Sleep.
Okay.
And again, now I'm speaking as a psychiatrist.
Right.
Where we know that majority of the mental health conditions worsen with lack of sleep. And your condition actually gets better with better sleep. It's so, so as a mother
Right.
and as a woman
Yes.
and as somebody who has a lot of responsibilities, sleep almost always gets sacrificed.
Yeah.
Right? As in to say, there's so much more to do that
Yeah.
I need to do.
Like this is quality sleep,
Right?
yes.
But I'm
It's-
talking about quality sleep, right?
Yeah.
Where you're able to actually sleep enough hours to be able to then not just take care of everything you need to do for yourself, but for
Right.
everybody else too.
Yeah.
Right. And we take it on ourselves. We're always last, especially again, as women, this is very common.
Yeah.
Women tend to be a nurturer by nature. This is how Allah created us. Even if we don't have biological children, we just nurture everyone
Yeah.
around us. It's part of how he created us. But then we end up forgetting to refuel, to stop and get, right? Fill our gas tank or
Yeah.
plug in our electric car, however you like to
Yeah.
think of it. Right? Either way, there needs to
Right.
be some sort of like refilling And if you don't, you're literally running on fumes after some time. And then comes the irritability and the anger and feeling resentful of other people.
Right.
And feeling like there's nobody who cares about you or sees you or understands you. And part of it's a two-way road, right?
Yeah.
Some of that may be accurate, but then also the other part of that you've given now too much, right?
Right.
Is also problematic because the boundaries, and people have trouble with the word boundaries.
Yeah.
And I understand why. You know, a lot of this pop psychology, there's all these terms of pop psychology that are somewhat problematic. Boundaries could be one of them.
Yeah.
But
But
you know,
establish your boundaries. Yeah, it's easy for you to say, you're not an Asian Muslim woman. You know,
Sure,
there is no
sure.
boundaries in our family dynamics,
right?
you know?
It's
Right?
very, very what we call collectivist, right?
Yeah.
There's many, many, many stakeholders making decisions on things. But look, even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran speaks about his boundaries. That these are the hudud of Allah. These are the boundaries of Allah. Do not transgress them, right? Even he has put these here. So that teaches us something that yes, we are allowed to have boundaries, but not so rigid and inflexible that now all your family members are upset with you, right? Your parents, your in-laws, whoever, they're kind of like, what, you know, what about, it's got to be somewhat flexible, but there is such a thing as boundaries. Otherwise everything goes and everybody's stepping on your space and time, right? And then there will inevitably be that reaction of the bitterness and the resentment and the irritability because you truly didn't have time for yourself. And then the one that I'm very concerned about is people not having enough time to really build the relationship with Allah. You know, like they're building relationships with their spouse, with their children, with their family, with their in-laws, with their society, community, even the ummah, right? But there's very little connection with Allah, and that's the core. That's like the central core. That if that falls or if that's not there, everything else gets affected. There's a ripple effect from it. But if that's good, then you can go out and be able to do things, right? In good measure, with proper priorities.
See, with self-care also you need to prioritize. Maybe you have a question that you would like to. I feel I've been talking forever.
I know, she's very good.
Oh, thank you.
She's very good.
I agree.
Thank you.
Like we said or we discussed just now about women and being people pleasers, right? And setting certain boundaries is important as well. But those times when we don't get those moments to have that little bit of time with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those times where we do have to rush life just a bit, and those times where we don't get enough sleep. How do we
get enough sleep?
How do we cope? Not cope, but what are the
What's the secret sauce?
What I
the
know,
secret recipe?
it's so weird to ask this question because is there a secret sauce?
Yeah.
Well, this is what I'll share with you.
Okay.
That I've learned from some of my own teachers and mentors along the way, many of whom are women, and I think that helps. It helps actually quite a bit. Because you can see in reality, just not in the theory of like what you're studying in books, but actually lived reality.
Exactly.
Right?
And this comes from a lot of practice as well. So you know you can use most of it.
Excellent role modeling.
Yeah.
You know, like you can, I always say you have to see it to believe it.
Yes.
Right? And so, you know, it's really interesting. The idea of being creative is often what my teachers would say.
Right.
It's as in to say what? You're busy. You have a lot going on.
Yes.
As you mentioned, many of us, I'm sure, including the listeners, are going to feel the same way.
Yeah.
So where is that time to just have that luxury to sit on your prayer rug and do your dhikr and have this beautiful time with Allah? It may not come very often.
Yeah.
And it may be a while or in a certain stage of life. It's just chaos,
At
especially
all,
with
yeah.
little children for a while, until different stages of life that may become a reality.
Right.
What about this current stage? It seems chaotic, right? This is where the creativity comes in.
Okay.
This is where the things like you are doing your dhikr even as you're taking your commute or your walk. You're doing your dhikr as you're chopping vegetables and cooking. You're doing your dhikr even as you vacuum and clean and so on and so forth. And it's you sometimes have to stack things, stack them one on top of the other. And that's a beautiful thing about Islam. That in Islam, there's nothing wrong with actually stacking, right? You can get multiple hasanat, multiple good deeds with multiple intentions. It's one thing, but multiple intentions, right?
Right.
And so they would say to us, be creative.
Okay.
And at the same time, they would say, don't, especially as a woman now, I'm speaking now as a mother, woman, they, our teachers would say, you have what they call the 10-year excuse. Some of them called it the 20-year excuse. What they mean by this is a stage of life.
Okay.
So from the time, and Mabruk, congratulations for your young one, your baby that just came. But from that stage until they're finally self-sufficient enough, maybe that's finally like 10, right? And if there's multiple children, it may be 20 years, right? Until there's enough self-sufficiency, right? To be able, so that you're able to say, okay, I know they could feed themselves, clothe themselves, sit down and do some work. Like you don't have to be completely monitoring every single minute.
Right.
Now you can have a little more time that if you choose to stay on the prayer rug for a couple more minutes, you can. But in those early stages when they're toddlers and they're just clinging and mama, 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 mama all the time, right? It's very hard. And all you really can do is be creative as best as you can. And Allah knows this. He knows this, right? And so there isn't that heavy judgment at that point.
I get it. The creativity is a big part of it. Creativity is a big part of this.
Yes.
What about the guilt that comes with it though? With everything actually, I feel like we Muslim women in general, we get thrown a lot of guilt. It's nowhere near in the Quran that there is like guilt. A Muslim woman must feel guilt throughout their lives.
No,
nowhere. I've read a few translations and no, I can't seem to find it.
You didn't find the word guilt in there,
right? So, but it seems like there's a lot of guilt in our daily lives. It's like when we want to set boundaries, we're guilt tripped into breaking those boundaries down. When we want to say no, even in the most creative way, even if that person seems to be accepting of your no or your boundaries, you still feel that, what did I do? Was that wrong? Was that, that whole guilty thing, that guilt. How do we get rid of the guilt?
Yeah, and sometimes it's self-inflicted, as it to say.
It's
sometimes
so
it's
consuming.
Absolutely. It comes from the society around us sometimes, our family and other people. And then sometimes it's internal. Literally, we're guilting ourselves, whereas other people are not holding us to that high standard. Do you know what I mean? So I want to shift it a little bit. Like, can we reframe it a little bit here? Because this idea, because clinically the word we'd use is anxiety. There's a lot of these anxieties around could have, would have, should have, did I not do this well enough? What did I say? How come I said that? I shouldn't have said that, right? Oh, I should have been there. I should have, right? There's all of this.
It's like she's speaking from inside our brain,
yes,
right?
she's in my head. Yes, correct. I relate.
We relate. Exactly.
And there's such a thing as unhealthy worries and anxieties and guilt, right? But there's also such a thing as healthy anxiety. In fact, in Arabic, the way my teachers would say, they would say qalaq mubarak. So it's healthy or barakah-filled, blessed-filled anxiety. What on earth is that supposed to be? Yes, what does that mean?
It's really deep.
It's because there's a certain amount of, whether it's guilt or worries, that actually encourages you to keep going. You're holding yourself a little bit accountable to say, I could have, or I should do that better net tomorrow. But it's not the kind of guilt that gets you so down that you can't get back up again.
Yeah.
Because we're told to actually take ourselves to account. This idea of muhasaba or hisba, like taking yourself to account before you're taken to account by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So doing a little bit of that is saying, I really should have done that today. I really should have said that today.
Yeah.
And then you say, and I'm going to do better tomorrow, inshallah, right? You're able to then reframe all of that guilt and worry into something that's productive. You're channeling it to productivity versus just sitting there moping and saying, oh, I shouldn't have. Why did I do that? I'm so terrible. I'm so silly. I'm so stupid, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah, and it gets worse, you just start degrading yourself, from guilt.
Yes.
Right, so we can do that. Instead of just feeling the guilt, it's like, okay.
And we don't want to we won't wipe away all the guilt either, because there's some level of it that actually helps you move forward and inspires you to.
So that might have been a mess, but tomorrow will be better.
Yes.
And we will make it better. Inshallah.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. But okay, now that you've mentioned the whole anxiety and the overthinking and everything, so do you overthink in life?
Not at all. Not even a little
How
bit.
could you?
I am very focused.
Lying.
Yes. I think I don't know if is it a woman thing? Is it an Asian thing? I don't know. But
Is it an
overthinking
ADHD
is
thing?
a human thing, right? I think overthinking
Is definitely a human condition.
it's a
yes.
human condition. Overthinking, but so we covered the guilt, right? But this mental load, this overthinking, and when we know now that we can do it, and I love that bit about good anxiety. What was it?
Yeah, mubarak, blessed anxiety.
Blessed anxiety. I will tell my husband that. I was like, baby, this is blessed anxiety.
Yeah, because her husband's a
Yes.
part that's
This is a blessed anxiety.
bouncing off the walls most of the
and
day. Yeah.
this is good for us, but we have to make it productive, inshallah. And we can do it. We can do better the next day.
Don't tell him I said it.
No, and he won't watch this.
You're gonna say, who is that psychiatrist who told you that?
Yes. Okay. So, sometimes overthinking makes us want to try and control things, right? And we know that whatever has been decided has been decided,
Very important.
right?
Very important.
We know this. I know this. But still, this overthinking, right? This thing that you think that you know better and you should have made the better decision. How
do you remind yourself and pull yourself out of that?
Yeah, that controlling. I think it's with most of us. We're always trying to control the outcome more than our emotions. So we tend to go berserker over something we quite literally cannot control. Who can control outcomes, right? Not anyone. We can navigate it somehow to go the way that we want it to go, but we cannot control the actual outcome. But in the process, we tend to lose track of our emotions. We're too anxious. We overthink too much. We get too upset, or we get too excited, and then we jump the gun. So how do we shift that mindset to, if he wills it, he wills it. We know it. But if he wills it, he wills it. How do we start
It's exactly
believing
this. But that's exactly it, though.
Right.
You know it, but you know it, and we know it. But it's just reminders, and
Yeah.
reminders more to ourselves, honestly, than anyone else. I mean, so there's a couple of different hadith that come to mind specifically on this.
Fantastic.
Specifically, the one that says, if all the people were together to help you with something, they couldn't, except by the will of Allah. And if all the people were together to harm you in some way, they couldn't, except by the will of Allah. The pens have been lifted and the pages have dried. So that isn't to say, if harm or something difficult comes your way, this was already intended by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but He's also not going to leave you without any help and assistance, because with every difficulty comes ease, right? And at the same time, if somebody wanted to help, if some goodness was going to come for you, nobody can stop that from coming if it's meant for you. Right? Allah has already intended this.
Yeah.
And also we're not the only ones. It's not just our own work that brings goodness or badness, if you will. It's actually His will.
Yeah.
So part of it is pausing enough to do this. This is actually why people go into meditative, contemplative modes, because if you don't do enough of that, life is just chaotic and it's just rush. Right? But every so often when you do pause, you get to reflect on these very things. It makes you deeper and more, just kind of a deeper sense of commitment and with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing that He's the one who's in charge, not us. Right? The other thing that comes to mind is the idea of, law yaftah bab al-shaytan. So the word law, or like if, opens up the door for shaitan. So he's going to try to find that entryway, however, and the could'ves, would've, should'ves, right, is exactly where he enters in. And so you want to, every time you find yourself going down that road, you want to like, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. You want to like pull back because
go, what if this falls? What if this
Exactly.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim.
Absolutely. And it takes practice. None of it's easy. None of it comes overnight. This is literally daily practice,
And that would in turn actually start, it make it easier for you to control your emotions as well, I suppose, because you're more focused and you're not, bouncing off the walls, basically.
And it's normal. It's normal to have that feeling at first, but you can train your nafs yourself the way we can train anything. I mean, Imam Ghazali very famously said, if it's possible for us to train, forgive me for the example, it's his example, I'm just going to use it, but it's, if he says, if we can train animals to become pets, we could domesticate them and train them in certain behaviors, then imagine the human, how it's able to be trained, its nafs, right? Our nafs and our behaviors. It's all trainable. It just takes practice.
It does.
I find it easier when I'm actually working. When I do a stage performance and it's first night, opening night, and I'm the one giving the first speech or first one out on stage, and there's a whole room of people, and I rather just jump out of a plane, every time. And I'm backstage and my hands are cold and I'm sweating, and I pray. And Ya Allah, I release this performance to you. Whatever good or bad is what you've decided. So whether I flub a line or if I fall or if everything goes wrong or goes right, it was decided for me earlier on, and that's the performance. But you see, focus is just easier for me at work. So this is something that I have to train myself in my daily life, as me. So when I'm working, for some reason, I can hone into this. I can hone into that. But sometimes the ifs are a bit louder in the daily life, off stage.
I've waited so long to say this. Those ifs are gonna come even louder and even more often now that you have little Mohsin. Yes. And he went 4 months. He's
going to be 5 months soon.
Yes, it'll be 5 months soon. Yeah, my youngest is 7 years old. Enjoy. Yay. But inshallah, you have a good backup. You have a good support system. Alhamdulillah. I mean, I always say this at home with my husband, with my children. Allah has been so kind to me. I'm teary every single time. Allah has been so kind to me. The amount of naughtiness that I went, that I've been through growing up, and the fact that he's never left me, and I've always found my way back, alhamdulillah. So he's always been so kind to me. And speaking of that support, that's part of his kindness. I feel that our parents are our parents, and our sisters are our sisters, and our little what's it called, our little community is our little community, right? Which is very important for a mother, whether or not you're a new mother or you're I can't wait until they all start boarding school kind of mother. I'm almost there. But I believe that mom guilt is forever there. As I'm saying that, okay, go to boarding school, I'm already feeling that mom guilt. No, I cannot. I'm not. Everybody who knows me will know I'll never send my children to boarding school because I'm that kind of mother.
But it's crazy, mom guilt.
Yeah.
The moment I found out I was pregnant, whatever I ate or drank or watched or consumed, anything, it began.
Yes.
It began because I'm the last of all our sisters to have a child. And I watched all my sisters go through this. I watched my mom go through this. And I watched mom guilt, like, ooh, it's like, whoa, this is what it does to a person. Right. But the moment I found out and it starts, wow, why do you guys do this? It's amazing.
There's a constant question throughout with all my answers. How have you done this 4 times? I'm still doing it. So with mom guilt, from an Islamic perspective, okay? I'm not even going to use navigate the feelings anymore because it's crazy. Like how to navigate the feelings. How do we process our emotions? Because like mothers our age are probably from a time where our parents didn't understand the processing of a computer or a smartphone, let alone our emotions. It's just
it was
much
not something
deeper.
that was talked about.
Yeah. So how can we find peace, basically, in our efforts? How do we silence that mom guilt without affecting everything else, kind of thing? How do we process everything?
Well, look, I actually don't think that you have to silence completely mom guilt. I think there's some level of it that's actually protective.
Oh.
You know, there's something about, you know, there's when you have that sense of like, did my kid eat enough today? Like,
Right.
there's something okay about that.
Yeah, of course. Well, in
You
that
know what I
sense,
mean?
yes, of course.
Right? Or just being worried about the daily, like, you know, right now, are they being bullied? Do they have enough friends?
Yeah.
Or even when you forecast out into the future, what's it going to be like when they grow up?
Mm.
A lot of that is actually very normative. It's protective.
Right.
It's not so problematic, right? At the same time, it can go to an extreme. And it's the
Yes.
extreme that we're concerned about, where somebody becomes consumed literally with all these thoughts and worries about, you know, whether they're doing this mom thing right or not.
Right.
But the reality is there's so many ways to mother. And there's so many paths to being a good mother, actually. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That I don't want us to think that this is a totally negative aspect, because there's some protection to it.
To the mom guilt.
Yes.
Yeah.
But when do you find it? When do we know it's starting to become problematic? This is when we start to say it's consuming you to where it's literally bleeding into your everyday life. Like a person cannot seem to get their chores done, their work done, their schooling, anything that's happening around the house, except that they're consumed by this guilt.
Totally obsessed.
Yes, they're obsessed, exactly.
Right.
And it's now it's you're not able to find the joy or the contentment
Right.
in the mothering or in the process of keeping home or whatever it is she's doing. And also that it's starting to affect the people around her. There's this overbearing, over sheltering, micromanaging of everything and everyone there that becomes very heavy for the people around her as well.
Especially the ones that she's
The very people she's trying to protect,
Yeah.
right? Absolutely. And this is where you want to kind of like, you know, I keep talking about the pause. Like sometimes you don't even see or recognize you're doing it until you take a pause or until somebody externally says to you, kind of gives you a reflection about, you know, have you noticed that you're constantly telling your child spelling out every single thing they're supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
Right. And you may not have realized because it just became normal to you. And so sometimes we also have the humility of getting that reflection where somebody, a friend or a close person in the family says to you, have you noticed? Don't get so defensive about it because it could be that you've become so consumed without realizing even.
Yeah. But the defensive thing does happen a lot though.
Sure.
Yeah. All right, let's just say she's the one being defensive. It's just because you're here.
Oh, there's two sisters.
It's just saying. It's just an example. I'm not saying anything. Yeah, but let's just say she is one of those very consumed by the mom guilt, obsessed with keeping her child safe. So like the child's cousins are not allowed to come near the child because they are.
Is this a real example?
Yeah.
Or
They are allowed, but
Yes.
we're post-pandemic.
Right.
She's
You know, and the mother
25 months.
she's also got this underlying constant paranoia about viruses and bugs and whatnot. So yeah, but if we were to tell, you know, you need to calm down. If we are 3 years post-pandemic, it's not right. You know, 3 years post-pandemic, and they are cousins and they are blood relatives, so no problem
I
with
love
the
them
DNAs
very
and the
much.
genetics
I love them very
and all
much.
that. Yeah, so you're being a bit paranoid. And let's just say she gets
It's
defensive.
the how you say it.
There you
Aleya.
go. How do we go about that? Because it's a close-knit family
Be
thing.
creative as to how to say it, Aleya.
No, because it's a close-knit family thing. And I realize there's a lot of Asian families are really close, and we find that we're really close and we're really understanding, we're really supportive. But then when it comes to certain things that's said, you tend to immediately put your guard up and like,
We're more sensitive when it comes from the people that we love the
Yes.
most.
this is
Yeah.
true.
Right.
This is accurate.
So and aside from the creativity,
As she gives you the eye.
aside from the creativity, how can we go about it? Doing, saying things. Both sides.
So you
accepting.
know, like you know the person who's close to you as well. So if you know
Right.
that's something that upsets them or triggers them or gets them really, worked up,
Right.
this is also where you also need to take kind of a step back, because you're right. It could be that it's coming this close of a relationship.
Yeah.
It could actually be even hurtful potentially.
Yeah.
Or a feeling of judgmental.
Right.
Whereas a friend could say the exact same thing and not have the same reaction.
Yeah, it'll be like, oh
Right.
yeah, it makes so much sense.
Right?
Right.
Never happened.
So,
I did want to say something though
yeah.
about some of the obsessions, fears, worries,
Yeah.
anxieties that actually sometimes, and I'm not meaning this to you directly per se,
Of course not.
but just in general, that if sometimes it actually can have roots to it. There's something about those, let's say the germs, right? The anxiety around the germs. It's true. We all just emerged from a pandemic just a couple of years ago.
Right.
At the same time, there might be something else kind of deeper there that is a personal, individual thing that a person went through, and it's manifesting itself now, right? As in to say, it didn't, and we find this with parents, especially first-time parents, very, very often, that if it's something that they never dealt with or processed, it was just kind of pushed under the surface for a very long time. Sometimes it doesn't show up again until that person themselves becomes a parent or becomes a wife or spouse, or or somehow they're back in a situation of something they never actually dealt with early on,
Right.
and then it starts showing again. It kind of like rears its head. Yes.
Remember me?
It's about time I poke my head out again. Right. So, wow, to be able to come to terms with that or deal with that at this part of the journey, after so long of you're not realizing it, and then two, not being able to process it because you didn't realize it the first time around. I don't know. Would it be as effective to fix it now?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. Something that was never processed. There's that word again, processed early on.
Yeah.
It's never too late. Better now than later. In fact, I would say for a first-time parent, their child is just months old, just toddler, very small. But eventually that same child's going to become a bigger child and eventually a young adult. And if things aren't dealt with now, they're just going to keep on progressing in this way, worse and worse. So absolutely, no better time than the present.
Okay. On that note,
Get help.
the power.
Deal with your germs.
Yes, also the power of dua.
Yes, power of dua.
Yeah, the fact that we are post-pandemic, alhamdulillah, we survived all of that, and there was a lot of du'as. Because I would like to believe it's because of that as well, especially in Islamic parenting. The first things we teach our children, it's in Malaysia, it's the Allahumma barik lana fima razaqtana wa qina azabannar. That is quite literally, I think most of the time, is the first full dua that is taught to them, and usually we say it before we eat.
Yes.
Right? So it's so central that seems to be the staple. So when it comes to Islamic parenting, though, could you share with us your favorite dua when it comes to the actual parenting? For parents,
yes.
maybe, yeah.
For parents, what I would say for my child.
For that, and also for parents to say to themselves.
Oh,
yeah,
Yes.
or to each other, the father to the mother to the father, just as a remembrance, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, the first part of it, when you ask about, what do we say? This idea of أعيذك بكلمات الله التامات من كل شر وهامة وكل عين لامة من الشيطان الرجيم. Sorry, I'm just remembering the Arabic so I can tell you the English.
Right.
It's, you're basically asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect your child from every sort of harm, anything it may be, right? And you're saying this in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect over these children or child. And that's powerful because you're basically saying, Ya Rabbi, as a parent, I'm going to do my best to protect my child and to raise them up. But your protection, Ya Allah, is stronger than any protection that there can be or I could even attempt to provide, right? And so from all evil, from all harm, from all things, right? That's a beautiful dua. And it's actually meant to be recited nightly, to the children and for the children.
You need to share it with us later.
Yes, of course.
Once again, the
Happy
Arabic
to.
especially.
Happy to. And then there's the what you said was just so beautiful. What do you say to yourself?
Yeah.
Right. And this is that almost like a mantra, something you need to kind of say to yourself, And I think, and this isn't any specific wording in Arabic, but it's just in English, I'll just say, Ya Allah, help me do the best that I can do. It's just this idea of like, you're here to do the very best you can do.
Yeah.
And any gaps or any holes, that's where the barakah gets filled in, right? This is where Allah's blessing kind of just fills in the rest of the gaps because these children don't come with manuals.
Yeah, they don't.
We don't-
Nice if they did.
We've been looking. We've like Googled like all 7 years and all 15 years.
So you're literally just doing the very best you can do.
Yeah.
I will say this one other thing though. It's about also breaking any generational traumas that have happened.
right.
You know, the way we parent, and I'm sure everyone has had this experience that's a parent, that they've said to themselves, I will not say or do the same thing I heard my parents do.
And we end up.
And then you end up having your child or
Just had
children.
this conversation in the
And
car.
the same words, I'm not even saying the same words, the same tone
Yeah.
comes
yes.
out of your mouth again as you heard your parents, even though you swore you would never do that.
Yeah, I'm doing the whole, when I die, you'll understand the pain.
'Cause
And
we
I'm like,
Asian.
oh my God, yeah, Allah, like why am I doing
But do you know why we do this? Because
of the generational trauma?
we as humans will always default back to the baseline. And the baseline is whatever your baseline was. For some
Right.
people, their baseline was chaos, and for other people, their baseline was had a lot of trauma in it, and other people had a more serene, baseline. So you
Yeah.
tend to go back to, and if you don't actively try to change
right.
that
The baseline. Yeah.
it'll just default right back to the same baseline it was.
right.
Chaos or violence or trauma or whatever it may have been,
So you need to break the chain.
right? You have to break that.
Right.
Like literally, you have to take the steps to say, I'm going to make this different. I'm not going to repeat the same mistakes. I'll take what was good,
Yeah.
right?
of
But I'm
course.
not going to repeat the same mistakes.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
It does.
From both mothers and fathers, yeah. So please, I hope that, because we have been talking a lot about the mothers as well, but I know a lot of fathers as well, or single fathers as well, and dealing with daughters and sons. You're doing amazing, and whatever it is that you're feeling is completely valid. You are not weaker for being emotional. No, we see you. We see you. So yeah, it's also from men also, like kasihan lah. We've been talking about the mothers and the women and everything. Like we need the fathers too. That they
100%.
Yeah, we became mothers thanks to them as well. So
What would be your number one advice? I know it's difficult, very general, but what would be that number one advice? So the first thing that comes to your mind that you tell a parent?
I would say the same thing I said with the dua earlier. You do your very best, and Allah's going to carry the rest.
And that would be the number one.
Absolutely.
right.
I mean, that's all we can do, right? Do our best, inshallah.
She's just repeating this to herself as a mantra. This is her mantra.
This is her mantra now.
Yeah.
Thank you, doctor. Another thing, in this day and age, raising a boy in this day and age, I want him to grow up to be kind. I want him to be gentle. I want him to be inquisitive. I don't want him to think that crying is weak. I don't want him to think that asking for help is weak either.
Yeah.
So we,
Yeah.
where
And
do
you
I
know what?
begin?
Right.
And you know what? It's exactly these sentiments that you have that are going to make him gentle and kind and inquisitive. Because the reality is, and I think about this all the time, our children are a product of how we raise them.
Very much.
And including the boys that then become men who have such complexes, you have to ask, well, who raised him this way in the first place? It could be within the family. It could also be the society, the larger society and culture allowed for this. But, a lot of this starts right at home.
Most.
And to make that decision to say, my girls are like my boys are like my girls, and to make the decision to say, when help is needed, take it. Actually, you asked me about my advice for parents.
Yeah.
Can I add another advice?
Yes, of course.
My other advice would be get help and take help whenever you can get it.
Right.
There's nothing shameful in that. We're not superwomen or supermen. We're
Yeah.
not meant to be. And so literally take advice. Take this advice as in to say, take the help whenever you can get it. It's so needed
It is, especially in this day
in
and
this
age.
modern era.
Yeah, everybody's working in silos. They're living in silos, I feel.
Yes.
So when there is a helping hand, when you're like, hey, you know what? Let's get together and work something out. do it.
Do that. Yes.
Yeah.
Co-op it.
Yeah.
Basically take a break whenever you can, for example.
Right.
And then this idea of like, we are the ones raising our boys and our girls at the end of the day. And there's an example that when you said about crying, it really kind of resonated with me because I speak very often about even for faith events this weekend, I'm speaking about the story of the psychological nuances in the story of Surah Yusuf, right? The whole chapter of the Quran of Surah Yusuf. And, one of the main highlights in that whole story is Yusuf's father, alayhi salam, Sayyidina Yaqub, where he's crying so much until his eyes literally turn white with grief. That's what the verse says. وَبْيَضَّتْ عَيْنَاهُ, right? And that verse to me speaks volumes. And here's another example, just like the example we gave earlier about the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where, how could we say just because he had a year of sadness, would we ever dare say that he didn't have good enough iman?
Right.
Well, would we ever dare say that about Prophet Yaqub and his crying? I mean, intensive crying for years, because it was many years before he was reunited with Yusuf again, right? So imagine, alayhi salam. So you're talking about decades, literally decades of
he was
crying.
a full-grown man.
And so what do we say to our boys, though, in terms of crying? I have this in my culture, right, that I come from.
Yeah.
And it may very well be in Malaysian culture, you tell me.
Boys
but
don't cry.
Boys don't cry. And if they do, we tell them, don't be a girl.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I cannot hear
Right?
that in my house.
Man up.
Yeah.
Right?
We don't ever use that. Yep.
And so to me, I'm just, when you go from, you asked me about the Islamic lens, the Islamic paradigm is very different than our cultures.
It is.
The Islamic paradigm is essentially teaching, here is Prophet Yaqub, a prophet of God, some of the best of humans ever created. And yet he cries so intensely, not for a lack of iman or faith, not for a lack of tawakkul or reliance on Allah, and certainly not because he was effeminate.
No.
Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
How dare we say he's any less of a man because he cried so much?
Right.
So imagine what we say to our boys. It's how we raise them. It's what we say to them. It's when we say to them, it's okay to cry if you feel like you need to cry, right? But we're not wail and scream and carry on. Yes, there's a middle path. And it's okay to get help. Yeah. If you feel like you need help, reach out for help. But this whole idea of I need to like put this armor around me that many men do, and women sometimes as well. But this like armor of I am strong, I cannot be broken, is not, it's not human. It's not humanly realistic. Nor is it something that comes from the very sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who's meant to be the most gentle. We know him to be the most gentle of all humans. So inquisitive and introspective, and can see the person in front of him. Yeah. Literally, he can feel, in so many of the narrations, you can literally feel, he feels the emotions of the person in front of him. Well, how do you do that if you have a whole big armor around you?
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's something unprophetic, right? That we're doing. And we need to be more prophetic in our models of parenting and upbringing.
That was beautiful. Yeah, that was fantastic. And I want to go on and on, but I think that's like the 7th time our producer has gone. Like
time
doing
flies.
A bit of a lasso yippee move in the air kind of thing. But it was amazing, Dr. Rania, and thank you so much for making my sister, feel a lot better about herself. I think I feel like she feels seen now. Yeah, because we have
it was
that.
a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine. You both are hilarious, by the way. We have to keep composure
we really
here.
don't mean to be. This is all unintentional and accidental. So we're accidental comics. That's what we have for you there. But that's a wrap for today's episode of Faithfuel podcast. Faithfuel podcast. And I really do hope that this conversation has left you inspired, also more accepting, I hope, of your flaws and your weaknesses when it actually is not a weakness per se. It's human, right? And it's human. And at the end of the day, it's all, Allah has said it. Yeah, that acceptance and the
Pausing.
pausing.
Be creative.
Be creative. and blessed anxiety.
Yes.
Yes.
Qadat Mubarak.
Yes, blessed anxiety. So that's one way of looking at it. It's like, mashallah. So yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Rania, for being
Wonderful
here.
perspectives. Thank you so much.
MashaAllah, the pleasure's all mine. It's such an honor to be here. And thank you for having me for the podcast. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen.
Alhamdulillah, thank you.
You don't understand. Yes, she does, right?
No, as
Together.
team.
Together, yes.
Oh yeah, I would listen to that first.
See? The problem is, I could see it from the corner of my eye, and he's laughing and laughing and laughing and laughing.
That's
And I'm like,
why
and I'm the one who giggles all the time. And I have to like control myself. I'm like, okay, I'm on the part. Can't you start laughing?
I saw you holding back the giggles, and I'm like,
Inshallah.
but yeah, we have this.
But it's so wonderful because I know it's something so what it's meant to feel so far, psychiatry and Islam.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, we're so conditioned to believe that
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
two separate things, and whereas
it is the white man's
That's how-
magic.
Yes.
yes,
It's the white.
Is this camera still rolling?
It is the white
the
man's
show.
magic.
Yes.
It's not.
No, but that's my story too. That's exactly what happened to me. I had no interest in psychiatry because that's what I felt. That's what I believed. I believe
white
this
man's
too.
magic.
It took a long time to figure out the connection between Islam and mental health.
And it's so beautiful.
And it's right there.
And it's right
It's
there.
right there.
When you point it out, it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, where